it's a tiny bit later than normal, Dr. John, but that's all right. We can still sort of get along with things, and let's jump straight into it. Creation.com, they've got their own website, of course, creation.com, where you can find lots of information, or you can send your questions in for Dr. John right here, right now, to our text line, and we'd love you to send those questions in. Dr. John can answer your questions. Just send them to our text line. It's 0401 949 949. Now, Dr. John, last week we had a question that came in regards to why haven't the global warming advocates brought up the Chinese treasure ships of Zheng He of the early 1400s, travelling through the Bering Strait towards the North Pole, then west around the top side of Russia as a shortcut to Europe? If there's global warming, why isn't this route still open? That was an interesting question.
Yes, it was, Mick, and obviously there was a time when it was possible to do that, because we do know that a few centuries ago the Earth was very much warmer, and they often refer to that as the medieval warm period. And obviously there was a lot less ice in the polar regions. Yep. And I think Greenland was used for farming, and it might have been that gave it its name, Greenland. So it's not that green now, so things must have been a lot warmer then. Yes. And that's what our listener was referring to, the Chinese travelling to Europe via the Arctic. And they've actually got a plan to do just that if the Earth begins to warm again and the ice starts to melt. And apart from the historic bit, it's been proven recently to be possible anyway, because a couple of years ago a Russian tanker travelled from Norway, which was obviously North Atlantic, through to North Korea, which is in the Pacific. So that's going the other way, but it's the same sort of principle. And that ship was built to be an icebreaker as well as a tanker, so obviously it's feasible even now. And the Chinese were renowned. Our listener spoke about a guy, I think his name was Admiral Zheng, and they were renowned for building these large treasure ships that traded far and wide, and of course they traded by land along what we refer to as the Silk Road. And it does seem that they did that Arctic route as well in ancient times. I actually couldn't find too much of a reference to that, but clearly this is not the first time in history that the Chinese have been a real power, a real trading power. Mostly it's in the past it's been trading. They've never been a colonising power, which I suppose is fortunate from Australia's point of view. We wouldn't want them to be a colonising power. We'd much prefer them to be a trading power. And, of course, all that assumes that the Earth really is warming and that the Arctic trade route is going to open up again. And when you see what's happening in the world, though, you wonder whether what we're observing is science or propaganda. And, I have to wonder whether a bit of it really is propaganda, because I heard that early last month the Pope actually hosted a gathering of a very large number of the leaders of various faiths, and it covered pretty much the whole lot, all the Christian groups, Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist, you name it, they were all there. And just about every significant religious group was in attendance, and they claimed that all those leaders covered about 84% of the world's inhabitants. I mean, that's a pretty fair swag, isn't it? Not that, of course, everybody who adheres to those faiths would have been fully in agreement with what their leaders were saying, but they did produce a document that they were going to present to the COP26 group that's meeting in Glasgow. You know, the one that Scott Morrison has gone over to attend.
Yep.
And the Pope's group stated their belief in the reality of climate change, and they're urging the leaders at Glasgow to take vigorous action because they claim that climate change is going to adversely affect the poor and the underprivileged.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know whether that's true, and I don't know why the religious leaders would know any more about climate change than anybody else. But there you go. That's what they were doing.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether we've got time to share a pretty interesting story, Mick. How are we going?
Yeah, I think so. Yep. Throw it in.
Yeah. Look, I heard this story. I can't promise that it's true, but it's a great story, so it's worth telling. You know that this conference, this climate change conference, is in Glasgow, and apparently most of the world leaders are actually staying at a place called Glen Eagles, which is about 75 k's away. And they're attending the conference in Glasgow, but their accommodation is much better at Glen Eagles. And the organisers have purchased 20 brand new Teslas, cars that is, right, to ferry them to the conference because, of course, they've got to be seen to be very, very green at this conference. But there was just one catch. Where they were staying, there was only one Tesla charging station. So because they need to charge up the Teslas every night, they had to hire a whole lot of diesel generators to charge.
Yes.
I thought that was, even if it's not true, it's a great story. And it reminds me of John McEnroe's famous outburst on the tennis court. You cannot be serious. So, you wonder who they're trying to kid, really.
Absolutely. And, of course, there's a lot of people out there that, they're sort of spruiking the whole climate change thing. And they're spruiking it because they can see the rubbish that's left around us. They can see the pollution in the sky. And I guess we can see their point of view. There is a lot of rubbish out there. There's a lot of pollution out there. And they're the things we have to work on. They are things that humans are, I guess, messing up on our planet. At the same time, though, there are other powers that be that are pushing the economic barrow and not necessarily looking at, I guess, what's just in front of them. They're looking at bigger things that really just add up to dollars in their pocket, and they're pushing an entirely different, this is climate change barrow, and that's what you're really talking about, Dr. John. You are on 94.9. It's 24 minutes. Denies you deny what's going on the planet because of all, look at all the pollution and the mess and everything else. What do you got to say about that?
Well, look, Mick, there's a huge amount of pollution and mess, and a lot of it stems from economics. And you mentioned how there might be a bit more attention diverted to cleaning up the planet rather than worrying too much about the production of carbon dioxide. Because when you think about it, look at the enormous amount of waste that we do produce, all the plastics and everything else that's polluting. And that's really been because of commercial interests. It hasn't been because people wanted to do anything. But, we don't refill bottles anymore. We smash them up. We produce all the plastics. We produce all the packaging for the TVs that we buy and all of this sort of stuff. And it really is a very, very sad thing that we do such damage to the planet from economics, really, and commercialism.
Next line, which is 0401 949 949. That's right. If you've got any questions right now, just SMS Dr. John, 0401 949 949. And we also talk about, news and events that have happened over the last week or so. And, of course, in the last week, Dr. John, we've had Halloween. I walked down the street. Well, actually, I drove down the street through Terrigal the other day, and Wow, the number of people, and it's not just kids anymore, it's now adults in Australia. When I was a kid, you hardly heard about Halloween unless you saw it on an American movie, whereas now it's just blown up. You know, there's kids, trick-or-treating down the street, and there's now adults putting all their gear on and walking down the street in Terrigal. I was quite surprised to see so many people dressed up for Halloween.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it, Mick? Because, like you say, when you were growing up, really, it wasn't an issue in Australia, and it's really only become an issue, I guess, because, my suspicion is that the stores saw it as an opportunity for promoting a bit more apparel and all of that sort of stuff. And it's a very, very interesting feast, that Halloween. And of course the word comes from Hallow Even, the evening before the traditional day, the Feast of All Hallows, which is November the 1st.
Yeah.
So Halloween is the evening before that. And but its significance in Christianity, apart from, whatever other cultures got up to on Halloween, is that it's also the anniversary of the day on which Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the church door in Wittenberg in Germany. And he did that in protest to what he saw was a gross violation of Christian principles. And you might remember the issue that prompted his protest, and that was that a monk had come as an emissary from St. Peter's in Rome. They had a rebuilding program, and he was collecting money. And the promise was that if you gave a certain amount and in a graded scale, the more you gave, the better. You would get remission of time in purgatory. Now, we're not going to talk about whether purgatory is a reality or not, but the fact of the matter is Martin Luther said that can't possibly be Christian, because that means the rich people can buy their way out, whereas the poor people are going to have to endure the flames. So that's what he did. It was a protest, and of course out of that was the Protestant or Protestant Reformation. So really, it's been such a blessing to Christian believers, because what Martin Luther came to see was a truth that's always been there in the scriptures, but it had been lost a bit over the centuries. And he brought the church back to a remembrance of what God's New Deal or New Covenant really is. And it's not based on the merit of your life, but it's based on the merit of Jesus' life. And God's New Deal is that whereas under the law of Moses you were going to be accepted by your adherence to the law and obeying its commands and so on, under the New Deal or the New Covenant, it was what Jesus did on your behalf that God accepted you, that basis. And of course, whereas formerly under the old Mosaic law, you had to have a lot of animal sacrifices to put away sin, well, Jesus' death was the once and for all time sacrifice to remove sin. And the merit of his life lived in obedience to the law gets applied to everybody who believes it. So that means that God accounts us as righteous because we have believed in Jesus, and not because we've been obedient to law. So, I mean, that truly is freedom, and we are greatly indebted to Martin Luther for restoring an understanding that had actually been lost. And so, to me, that was the significance of last Sunday, not Halloween. I mean, it was Halloween the day on which he did it, but he didn't do it in a celebration of Halloween. He did it as a protest to something fairly nasty that had crept into the church.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's exciting. And I guess that's a good reason to celebrate on that day, not necessarily by putting a witch's hat on or putting a pumpkin out the front that looks like a devil's head. It's celebrating something good that's happened in the church, and that's putting our eyes back on Jesus and what he really came to do. You are on 94.9 this morning. It is Ministries International. If you'd like to ask Dr. John a question, just send it through to our text line, 0401 949 949. Now, Dr. John, we had a question that you sort of partially started talking about last week, and the question was in regards to a cashless society. It talks about it in the Bible, and there's a lot of people out there that are sort of saying, hey, I don't really like cash. It's a pain. You get this stuff in your pocket, you leave it in the washing machine, it ends up all over the floor of the car. I'd prefer a card or just my phone to tap on things. That's a cashless society. Isn't that good? And then there's other people out there that have this fear. It's like, oh no, it says it's coming in the Bible. Let's, get scared. Well, I mean, it's sort of a prophecy, so it's going to come. What's your take on it, Dr. John?
Well, look, Mick, I suppose it all started, it came to the fore maybe about 18 months ago, I suppose, when COVID broke out. And what we saw right at the beginning of that outbreak last year was that some shops didn't want to handle cash. Mm-hmm. And we all saw the signs go up that credit card payments were preferred. And, of course, there was a reason for that, because the possible contamination of banknotes. And, of course, we all started the social distancing thing and the regular hand washing and using the disinfectant hand stuff and stopped handshaking. And the thought was that maybe we should stop handing over paper money, or plastic money, I suppose it really is, but handing that over. And it all seemed like a pretty common sense response to the whole problem. And I don't think anybody would have disputed that was maybe a good idea. But it does raise some theological issues that I think we ought to be reminded of. And why that is of interest to me personally at Creation Ministries is one of our issues is that what we want to do is defend biblical truth.
Yep.
And that means we want to look at what the Bible says about the beginnings of creation. And we see that, God says that's what he did and over what time period he did and when it happens and so on. And we look at all the scientific evidence and we see that, that really does back up what God says in his word. And we can go through the other historical books in the Bible, the books of Kings and Chronicles and all of those things, and we see that scoffers have said no, that's not true. But archaeology eventually then shows us that really, after all, it was true. Yeah. And then when we look at the prophetic books, the books like Isaiah and Ezekiel and Daniel and all of those, the scoffers have said, they're not real prophecy. And what they're saying is that they're not prophecy because they reckon those books were written after the event and made to look as though they were foretelling the future. And the book of Isaiah, which of course is one of the most magnificent books in the Bible, one of our prophetic books, they said, it can't possibly be prophecy, it can't be foretelling the future. Nobody can foretell the future, they say. And of course it mentions Cyrus as the deliverer of the Jews from the Babylonian captivity 150 years before it happened. And then, of course, we're all familiar with Isaiah 53, the obvious description of Jesus' crucifixion and suffering and so on. And they scoffed at that too. But then the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, and lo and behold, it hadn't been reworked by the church. It was the original story that Isaiah had put in.
Yeah.
And then we get to the prophecies of the New Testament. And I guess the most famous of the New Testament prophecies is the second coming of Jesus. If we look at the book of Hebrews, it says that Jesus came the first time for sin, and he's going to come a second time for salvation.
Yep.
And that really was the second coming of Jesus was one of the things that really was emphasized in the early church. Mm-hmm. And if you think about some of the things that some of the creeds, like the Apostles' Creed and the Nicene Creed, they all focus pretty heavily on the second coming of Jesus. The Nicene Creed says he will come again in glory to judge the living and the dead, and of his kingdom there'll be no end. Mm-hmm. So all of those things are of church history, and those creeds were formulated as a summary to what all Christians really do believe in. And so when we get to the second coming of Jesus, Jesus in particular, and Paul also, said quite a bit about what would be happening just prior to his second coming. Mm-hmm. And they talked about the moral state of the world and the sort of conditions that would apply, and that there'd be an increase in earthquakes and pestilences and so on. And they both emphasised that one of our greatest problems would be deception, mm-hmm. and things that might cause people to fall away. And it's very important to look at the possibility of deception, because our eternal salvation is at stake if we do allow ourselves to be deceived. Mm-hmm. And I think we have to realise that our deceiver is the devil. Paul says the battle's not against flesh and blood, it's against principalities and powers, wicked spirits in heavenly places, and so on. And Satan comes just to, according to Jesus, kill, steal, and destroy. And he does that to a large extent through evil people, through the sin of man, actually. And man has always been attempting to oppress his fellow man, because he's been motivated by the devil. And when we're talking about the return of Jesus, and we look at the signs of things that have been prophesied in the Bible, you wonder if things may not be too far off in the future for that return. And the cashless society might really be a sign that what's been prophesied might be fairly close. I mean, I'm not suggesting it's something that Christians would oppose, but they certainly ought to see it as a warning that, we really need to get ready for the second coming of the Lord, because it might not be too far away. And even things like the great convenience of the cashless society, all these wonderful inventions of man often get turned to evil purposes. So we're going to be a bit wary about what the future might hold over that.
Yes. I guess the bottom line is, though, we shouldn't fear it. It's more we should just, keep looking towards Jesus and reading the Word and stay with Jesus, rather than fearing the things that are in the prophecies. They're just signs of things to come. Dr. John, thank you again this morning.